It's been a while. It's been-
Order for the region.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Bernard.
Here.
Mr. Fernandez.
Here.
Mr. Grady. Here. Ms. McNair.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Paris.
Here.
McCormick.
I don't think there's any public. Here. Is that it right there on the screen?
That's it on the screen.
All right, so I have a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes of January 14, 2025 regular meeting and February 6, 2025 special joint.
So moved.
Second. Second. Question? Favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Have a motion on item F1.
Move to appropriate $6,009 supporting arts grant for the fiscal year 25 supporting arts grant account for the economic development fund.
Second. Second. Question? Favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Move to appropriate $29,781.50 from the sale of lands, labor, and materials account for the vehicle reserve account, both in the capital non-recurring fund to be used for the purchase of vehicles.
Second. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
Move.
Move to transfer $23,740 as detailed on the accompanying spreadsheet to be attached to the minutes to cover year-end transfers and identified accounts.
Okay. Second. Question?
Aye.
Hey, Ken.
I have a couple things just to make you guys aware of, but before I start, are there any questions on the financial update? Any conditions be solid for the town?
Question?
Expenditures are up a little bit higher. We are over budget right now. It's storm overtime. I'm surprised there, I'm sure. I didn't call it out as risk because we do have other things that will offset it. But we're running well in our areas.
Right.
All right, I just had three things just to make you aware of that are working their way through either the council or have made their way through and waiting to hear back. One is the town applied for a neglected cemetery grant. Again, should we be awarded the grant, we'll be coming back to appropriate the money. We've had a couple of those over the last couple of years. Committee, along with Steve Wood and his group in grounds, have done a good job of improving several of our cemeteries. So hopefully we'll get that. I think there's a very good chance. Second is that the town has applied for a steep grant to try to do some additional work down at the community center and the library. Indoor air quality, you've probably seen it on the capital plan. We discussed the IAQ study and some of those things. So it's been an opportunity to deal with the chillers and the air quality, especially down in the community center area down below, as well as to help with the roof replacement over there. So we had to apply by the end of February. Council had approved and authorized the town manager to apply. I believe we're supposed to be here around April 3rd or so. So the town is required to have a match. The match we are using was from the premium, the bond premium we had from the last issue that we had appropriated to roofs. So there's no additional work for you guys to do there should we win the grant. That will come back your way for an appropriation as well. And then lastly, Kate Wall and Carrie Tishka, the library, are kind of spoke about the 250th anniversary signing of the Declaration of Independence and the town potentially something with that. Committee being formed. It's possible that we may be coming back asking to appropriate some fiscal year 25 surplus to help with some seed money to do some things around town to celebrate that. There's also been some discussions about potentially incorporating the anniversary of the Worthington Meeting House. It's the same year, that potentially you're doing something there or incorporating it together. So you may have a request at your end to put some money, not crazy money, but some money into that. So I just want to make you guys aware of those three things that, if all goes well, those two grants will be coming your way. To this.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Gave us something on the bid weekend.
There were two items on the B&A. First one I'll talk about is all the numbers. That's the P&L. So that is the latest P&L through February. They are better relative to budget, and in an absolute sense, the net loss is lower through February than it was prior year. So both good situations there. They are continuing to manage things tightly. Edie, who is the acting administrator while she gains her final credentials, has taken a close look at overtime and has made some modifications with that between per diem and staffing to make sure that that's being looked at closely and monitored. She is also nearing completion of her work. So while we continue to pay, his name is Sarah, the consultant, as we're required by Department of Public Health, she is actively working towards gaining the credentials that would allow her to be the administrator, not require the oversight. And you could be looking at potentially relative to this year, $25,000 to $50,000 less in the budget with that consultant out doing that work. So they're improving. The trends are positive. They are still in line to hit the revenue budget. I know it was reduced, but so was the staff. So it kind of went parallel. And on the cost side, they continue to work, even though they're seeing nice improvements. They're not letting up. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I've been working though, meeting with Edie and just to echo what Kevin said, the focus it has been on looking at the overtime and looking at shoring that up, and Edie has been able to make changes, particularly with 3-day weekends and using those per diems in those off hours. And I've been encouraged by the progress. I would expect to see things continue to improve over the next quarter as well. So as Kevin said, it is trending in the right direction. So we're doing. I will say they're doing the best that they can.
The second thing just has the color circle on it. The piece. These are the monthly metrics for quarter ending December 2024. They had 66 patients cared for, 53 are within Berlin. So that percentage is significantly higher than we've seen in the past. They are not out actively working multiple towns, as we've discussed. If those have been a part of it for the last few years, there's been various strategies attempted. The referral sources still remain strong and solid. Obviously, the Britain General is a close and good source. 35 starts of care is good because with the number of nurses plus per diems that they have, the 30-ish number is a reasonable census to try to go with. So to be able to have starts of care like that is a positive statement. And you can see, unlike past years, they've really just moved away from Medicaid, CCCI, which has helped in terms of the level of reimbursement and the performance there.
So what is the Medicare Advantage? Is that supplemental insurance?
It's essentially an alternative to Medicare, if you will, when you reach that age.
It's all encompassing.
Yeah.
So you have Medicare A, Part B, Part D, the drug plan, it's an alternative to that. Go to Medicare Advantage, like I go to United Healthcare, they do everything. So I don't carry around a separate Medicare card, have to first and supplemental later, they do everything. And that's all the billing, all the bookkeeping, whatever. The main difference is they operate on like an HMO PPO, preferred provider.
Yeah.
So I have to go to the doctors in that. Whereas regular Medicare, you can go to any doctor, actually anywhere in the country. With these, you have to stay pretty much in plan. So there's some drawbacks, but there's pretty decent savings too.
Thank you. Now, is the reimbursement about the same, or is it?
I don't know what the
No.
reimbursements are. I think there's still Medicare
Oh, I
reimbursements per se.
Sorry.
I think they're Medicare reimbursements per se along the payment schedules. I mean, it still is Medicare. It's just, it has some other things added into it. The drug plan, eye care, dental care, things like that. And again, it's managed by the insurance companies themselves and not Medicare separately.
Get into the meeting. You want to talk a little about, you don't have anything in our plan?
I don't have substantive updates on either one of the takeaways. I didn't have a chance.
Of course, we have to close this meeting
Still
out.
on stuff.
Oh, we're still on this agenda. Sorry.
I was not able to catch up with Ashley, so I'm still gonna work tomorrow night with the choice numbers that Tim had asked about. The police are actively working on the overtime and answering those questions. The chiefs were both at an offsite mandatory training, so they are gonna regroup. I spoke with one of the lieutenants today. They're supposed to regroup tomorrow morning and figure out, but determine coming tomorrow night to talk to you guys and address the questions.
Right, so. Think we outside, we're able to pretty much adjust everything. That's standing in place,
Town council is there.
really not talking about that. I need.
I bet you looked at it.
No, really, I mean, you go first if you like.
Right? All right.
This is not easy.
Okay. So I'm gonna throw a number out there. Okay. And given what's going on. State, federal. My number is at 5%. And that's just all contracted, the services and obligations. So it would be literally the red and green part. Obviously, there's to add.
Oh, want me to go next? Sure. This is budget number 6 for me. Every year, for the past 5 years, I've heard exactly the same narrative about what's going on in the schools and how much more they need. And, I don't know. I'm at the point now where it's almost like throw it at the wall, see what happens, because nothing ever comes through. Staffing is never caught. There's never big cuts in programs. And the student census goes down every year. It's never adjusted for. So I'm looking at what we've given them in the past. And every year they posted a surplus. Every single year they posted a surplus. Last year, $500,000. What we were told at the beginning of this, we had a bare minimum 4.6%. The world was going to end. So I'm going into this pretty much where we've been at, and I'm at 3%.
All right, so. Kind of argument would be. I don't think anyone, by the way, wants this, but the argument can be that it didn't cut anybody. That can be the argument. they did let go of some folks in the Board of Education staff, right? The stuff that we cut, like equipment and so on and so forth, licensing and all those things. They use that money to purchase all those things that we did not give them to begin with. Personally, I'm working with budgets and so on and so forth. If they come back at us having 0.5%, 1% left over in the budget, I call that a win. Like, I've been to places where, what's the alternative? They come back to us and say, hey, I need another $500,000. We'd be jumping all over their throats if they did that to us.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
No, we did, never done it, so. yeah.
Exactly, they never
Why-
come to us
why-
asking for
How
money.
can you say that that's what we do?
No, honestly, I would question it because if the superintendent, the board of and the Board of Education, their main job is to keep finances. And if they didn't do it right and they come to us asking for more money, that's a problem.
I think if they were unexpected things that
Mhm.
that came about from
Yes,
circumstances
of
beyond their
course.
control, like anything in the town or
Yes.
whatever, we would step up.
That I understand, yes.
I'm not saying it's bad they had a surplus, but they had a surplus. So, yes, they used it to fill in some of the stuff that we had cut from the budget, but ultimately, they really didn't cut staff. Their staffing is the same year over year for many years. It's right in
Okay.
all of their own stuff, so.
But Tim, are you talking staff as in teachers or are you talking staff as in Board of Education staffing? Because I've been here for 5 years now, 6 years also. And we took out an assistant superintendent. We took, what was the position last year, Kevin, that we cut?
Business manager of operations.
Director of operations was cut. Like, you can't say the little position is taken out when they have.
That was good though.
Yes, but it was a position that was cut. And the other ones are retirements and they're not being filled. And then we got with that mess at the math teacher in high school where we got this guy who, honestly, I don't know if he how to use a calculator. And we can't have people like that teaching our kids. If we decide to let go of teachers and get teachers who are not really good, we're getting ourselves into a massive problem. I prefer to keep the ones we have now that we know are good teachers.
Well, that's true, but ultimately, when you look at the DRG groups, our performance is going up every year. And we're moving up our GF, where we started way down,
Yeah,
we've been moving up through the DRG groups and we've been doing it at this continual, pretty much 3% pace. That's what we've averaged the past 6 years. So I just can't, it's hard for me to say they need more. We said last year, if you have a problem and you need more, come back and we can address it. And they never did, and they still showed up with a surplus. So it's hard for me to sit and say now that they need way more when they haven't one time yet shown us that they needed even what we gave them.
You know, part of it is we have arguments on both sides.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you look at their FTE chart, it's pretty flat pretty much except early on. And then you look at the student enrollment, it actually went down. So when you say they cut teachers, well, their enrollment went down in that 5 years time frame, enrollment went down 172 students. Actually, then the class sizes have been pretty much the same. They haven't been impacted. So, you know, you can look at it in many ways, you know, in terms of they're really not impacted because they have less students.
that's,
Okay.
I mean, that's, I see
You
your
know,
point.
I mean, but there's two sides there.
Yes, but having kids in school, you do see an impact. Like they got rid of 4 au pairs, was it 3 or 4 au pairs last year? They were giving support to the Paris, sorry. People like won't say. People won't say.
Like, what kind of schools are we running here?
Oh, bro, like this is, I'm just saying. But here's the situation, like you see, because can you agree that our kids since COVID, there's a difference than when I used to go to school, when you guys used to go to school. It's a totally different situation. There's supports that needs to be in the classroom. And having 2 kids and one in the middle school, one in elementary school, you do see the impact. There's a lot of kids, and sometimes you get 20 kids with one teacher. It's hard to help all 20 at the same time. They all have different needs. One might be hyper, one might not be crying in the corner. So you can't just say that, oh, it's all about the numbers and so on and so forth, but there is an impact. It truly is. So when I see these numbers come out, given the history of what we've cut so far in these last 5 to 6 years, you start messing with this number, and I assure you, it's not going to be paras, not going to be office staff, it's going to be teachers. And the only one they haven't touched thus far in all these years is elementary schools. And truthfully, that scares the hell out of me.
Okay.
What was the number for ECS?
There will be a COVID bump in elementary schools.
There was a lot of time spent at home.
That's the 5-year mark. Yeah.
That's the 5-year mark.
Yeah.
I guess if I could just, and as the new person, I guess, on the Board of Finance, but maybe the old person being around for a while, I look at it a little differently. I don't know why the goal is to cut people, staff. I'm not sure if they're not going over budget, the fact that they have the same staff that they had before doesn't bother me. I think that, yeah.
The thing is, they got the same staff, but a lower budget than the league. You know, they asked for 5%.
But I don't,
3%, they're okay.
but I don't think it's because,
Job management.
I don't think it's because they asked for too much. I think it's because of the shifting parts during the year, whether a teacher leaves and different expenses. I don't think that it's over budgeted. I just think that there's things that come up and the town is just as guilty or just as lucky to have a surplus every year. I would be upset if the Board of Ed or the town, other than for, emergencies, if COVID hits again or something, or if there's a crisis that happens like a fire, a major fire, I would be more upset if people came back year after year. The fact that they have never come back requesting any money and have a surplus, if that's what you want to call it, doesn't bother me at all.
I don't.
I would rather have that. I also don't like thinking that each year they have to lose people, whether it's teachers, Board of Ed people, paras, au pairs, whatever they have. That doesn't bother me as much.
Who are they replacing with that? Because their numbers are staying flat. Well, their FTE counts are flat. They're not going down. That's what I guess I don't understand. So you say that, and I know
But I
they
don't think
say
it's
that.
I don't think it's just that. I think it's because people have either left mid-year, they have people that higher priced people that may have left internally, administrators.
That's part of the nature
And
of.
paras-
Exactly.
paras
So
are
that's,
not
they
full-timers.
can move the money that they saved from, like, I know that the principals have changed over the
From
years, that kind
24
of
to
thing.
25, they went down 4. Up 1 the next year. No, they're saying they're up 1 this year. Well, overall, FTE is just
Have teachers. But that's all, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
it looks like it was 3 teachers that year that it went down. 23, 24 to 24, 25, it was 265 teachers to 262 teachers.
That year they did.
Where you at?
Oh, you want a number?
Sure,
Um,
I'll let you continue.
Well, while I agree with Raul as far as 5%, I know that's probably not realistic. The 4.37 is at least can't see without my glasses, at least the staffing contractual 4.5, I would say, just to get, because don't forget, there is this state mandated reading program, and I think that should be a no-brainer. So say 4.5.
That'll be outside the mandate, right?
Well,
Funded by us, but separately.
I would hope so.
Nobody was really looking for cuts, but you also have to manage fiscally. To me, almost like sacred if you say you're gonna cut something, it's like, so, I mean, sometimes you have to cut something, you have to cut something. I mean, that, whether it's Board of Education, we've done it with the town, so I don't know why the mentality is that, if we're trying to maintain some fiscal responsibility,
have to cut a couple positions, not that I want to, that's the reality of it. I mean, it's like, if you say something, you know, it's like, you shouldn't be saying it, you know what I mean, seriously.
No,
But we're not saying to fund it
No, but
completely.
I'm just thinking.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, but at the same token, that's not all what happened last year. We decided to cut the sports and everything else, and then all of a sudden, oh no, we're putting sports back in. We put another
Yeah, I understand
125,000.
that. But the thing is,
So-
well, part of when we go through the town stuff, right, we get a risk and opportunity.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
know where the current year is. Okay?
Yeah.
So if I ask the Board of Education, how you doing on your current budget? I don't have an answer on that.
Oh,
We
that's-
never have an
That's a
answer.
whole different topic.
Well,
I hear what
but
you're
the
saying,
point
where
is
you're
that
coming
there's
from.
no
It's
assessment.
a problem.
There's no assessment.
But you should expect they're gonna spend it,
Well, yeah, but, okay. Understand
right?
that.
Because we've just said, we don't care if they spend the whole thing.
Right, but
So
we're
expect
gonna
them
spend it
to.
if we give them 3%. We're gonna spend it if we give them 7%. They're gonna spend
Exactly, exactly.
it. So
You're right.
But if you give them 7%, it would be left over for next year. Because they don't.
there won't be anything
6.6.
left over.
They only have 6.8. You give them 7%.
There's-
I'm with you. You all heard it.
there's-
7%.
If they could carry something over, I would do this.
But they do carry over. That's how they ended up buying new laptops.
Spend it at the end of
They
the year.
have to,
That's
yeah,
what it's
Carry
for.
it over.
Exactly.
They can carry it over.
The other thing I'm
But they
looking at,
shouldn't.
long-term, I look at the graph here for enrollment by grades. And you go 12th grade this year, it's 241 students, and we have 158 students coming in kindergarten. That's almost 100 students lower over the next projected period.
So.
Now, that may change, that could change,
That
but
would, yes.
it could change with the stuff coming into town, it could also change with people moving. There's a million things that could change that, but ultimately, it's still a downward pattern, and it's been on a downward pattern for 20 years.
So, well, can we agree that if you cut teachers, let's say the elementary level, kindergarten level, right? Let's say that all of a sudden, right now, we're at 18, 19, 20 students per class. You end up having 25 kids per class with just one teacher. No one gets an education at that point.
Doesn't show that in the numbers.
No, but I'm saying is, but that's what I'm trying to say, like, you can't say like, oh, there's we less students, so therefore let's cut the teachers. That's, you can't say that.
Well, we never say cut the teachers. They choose to cut the
They
teachers.
choose to cut teachers.
I mean, I guess in the scheme of things and the most important things to them, what would be the most important thing in their entire budget to you?
Teachers.
Right,
Yeah.
but that doesn't seem to be the most important thing to them when it comes to it. Cause they cut the teachers instead of other things, you know, when's the last time they made major cuts in their, you know, administrative staff and things like that?
Last year.
One time,
Yeah, two
I
years
mean, we're
ago.
going back
Three-
5-6
No,
years.
3 years ago, it was the
It's-
superintendent. Like,
There aren't
And that
that
was
many-
like a
there aren't-
combo getting let go and combo getting fired.
There aren't that
Okay?
many
There's a lot of
administrators,
issues there.
but there aren't,
You know too.
there aren't that
So
many
that was just-
administrators to get rid of, though. They're really, I mean, when you're comparing teachers,
Yeah.
the number of teachers to the number of administrators, there's a big difference.
and we have a lot of teachers.
You're right.
Doing
you're right.
double
Well,
duty.
they also say certified staff. I don't know what that means. So,
Generally, certified staff as a teacher.
okay, certified
Oh,
staff.
yeah,
is a
with
teacher.
different, yeah,
Okay,
special ed stuff.
I think I asked that one first.
no, you're right. It's the bulk of it.
But even when you talked about the operations manager, I don't know the big names, but. So prior to that, that position was doing both the finance and the operations. We made that into two positions with Ashley. So I mean, we made it two positions, then we went back to one position. I mean, you know, things, mixed changes, that's all. All right, so we're gonna continue. I did something, okay? And, you know, I like spreadsheets, you know,
Is it on the fancy paper?
no, I'm a fan of it.
You had to cut back. on like-
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a source up for the chart.
Yeah, charts, yeah. Let's call it.
No, we have no-
Yeah.
So I've done this in the past, okay, so rather than, you know, saying how much am I gonna, you know, take out of, you know, the FY 26, I take off of FY 25. I'm saying FY 25, if you look at the total, it's 52,500,000. I just made an adjustment for what I call risk reserve, you know, put $500,000 out of that 52,517, saying there's some reserve in it. That's my judgment, okay? And what I did was then I broke it out between salaries, benefits, and all of it. I added 3% on salaries, and benefits excluding health insurance and all other. So if you look at, the first number, I added 3% on top of the salaries. The 59 there is really 3% on $2 million because 6 million of it is health insurance, okay? And then I put 3% on the all other category, which equals $1,400,000. And I added the 10% health insurance, you know, on $6 million, I added 600,000. And I added the new reading program for $215,000. So, you know, based on those calculations, I increased the budget by $1,700,000 or 3.2% over the FY 25 budget.
What's the ECF number?
DCS number is $1,128,490.
So roughly
Now that,
2%.
2.15.
that's 2.15%, which is mandated that we increase their budget to start.
Are you get a 2.1%?
The ECS.
ECS,
ECS.
Okay, gotcha.
I just divided that by it.
Well,
Estimated
that's just why,
increase.
you know.
Well, let me, I just wanna, I'm sorry, are
No,
you done?
no,
You know, I was looking at last year's budget and this year's budget and, you know, the town contribution to education, you know, is really what we're talking about here. Last year, we gave the Board of Ed a 3.26% increase. Out of that, $250,725 was a mandated increase by the state because they increased the ECS by that last year. Which meant that the net amount that the town funded out of their overall increase was 2.775%. Out of their total 3.26 increase.
Just for those numbers, because I was looking at them too, prior to last year, we were flat for 3 years.
Yes.
Got no, we're all, you know, if you look at that matrix they had of
Right.
all those towns,
No doubt.
most of those were getting ECS increases. They're still getting, relative to us, you know, most, where they talk about those percent raises in that chart they have,
Yeah.
a lot of that's coming from ECS. It's not town tax contribution to their increases and their per pupil spending.
Well, it certainly this year, $1,128,000.
This year was good.
You know, which is funding 2.15% of whatever increase they get.
This
So-
year was good.
I mean, if we're giving, just to say, if we gave them 3%, that means we're funding 0.85% of an increase to the Board of Ed, which is, to me, I don't know, what is that, probably $400,000? I mean, out of our pocket, which just doesn't seem like it's in the spirit of where we should be with this. And I you know, I don't wanna go down the road too much, but if we did the same 2.775% local contribution this year, that would be $1,457,352 on top of the ECS increase. Okay, and that would come up to about a 4.92% increase. You know, I think a couple things here. You know, and maybe that's a little too much, but I think however we do figure this in the end, that $215,000 for the mandated reading program should not even be part of what we're talking about as far as an operating increase is concerned. Okay. So, you know, I come back to, you know, looking at the contractual. You know, we've always looked, I think, and gave more credence to those increases than anything else. You know, the supplies budget always takes a whack, the transportation, tuition. You know, the tuition is very variable depending on what kids we get in. You know, the special ed costs could go crazy at any time. We currently have some kids that are, you know, over $200,000 a year. But it doesn't take much, you know, for that budget to take a whack. So I guess overall, I'm looking at, you know, in the area of covering the contractual.
So Gary.
Yeah.
Contractual obligations.
So 4.37 plus the
Take
reading.
the reading, yeah. Okay.
You know, and there again, just to finish that point on what our contribution is, I think they should get more this year because of that $1 million increase in ECS. You know, 1,128,000, we're up to what, 7 million or something, Kevin, 6 or 7?
1.2.
Yeah, you know, I think that by itself, you know, puts us in a position to, you know, to be adding on top of it. Right, thank you.
Thank you, George.
And you know, I looked at, given that I can't make any heads or tails out of what's in their budget to begin with, because you just don't know, really. It's complex, there's a lot of stuff in it. I can't look at something and say, well, this is real or not real, you know, type deal. Talking to a couple people that, you know, were associated with it, they said, you know, they do, I know they do build in a little bit of contingency into the thing, but I have no idea how much. You know, and I was tending to look at more of the numbers from that they give into the state and things like that, and look at how we were trending. And I know, you know, they're the ones that put out that chart that one time with those 7 schools and whatever. And as we've been trending over the last 3 or 4 years or 4 or 5 years, we started pretty much way behind a lot of those schools, and now we're in the lead of those schools type deal. And this was during a period of time when our ECS funding was not going up and their ECS funding did go up, because I looked at it. So we put more burden to get to that point where we are from a, you know, per pupil expenditure on our taxpayers than those other towns have. You know, and I charted it out and looked at it, whatever. Now, that being said, I think we've done a reasonable job in the past. And then to, you know, Tim and Sal saying, it's like, this chart's not any different than the one that we've gotten in the last 6 years. You know, it's kind of the same thing. And I don't think we've ever given them their contractual obligation, but yet they still seem to do improve and do better, and their funding's going up relative to these other towns or whatever. You know, one of the things that they do for the special education funding, that $40 million thing, you know, where they talk about DIRGs in here, well, they break that down into 3 categories. Okay, they break it down into high income towns, medium income towns, and low income towns, and we're in that middle bracket. Okay, it goes from, like, I don't know what the number is, like
0 to 59.
0 to 59, 60 to whatever and whatever. I looked at those numbers, and I looked at the per pupil expenditures. I looked at those charts where they made that allocation. I looked at what the median was, and we're above the median, just a little bit, but we're above the median. So relative to that group of people, you know, we're doing right where we should be. But then how do you take into account, as Jerry says, this $1.1 million too? So,
I think to your point, we've done better in the groups that we're in, right? Whatever the problem with their charts are, not having the right towns or whatever. When I look at the NCEP, the net current expenditures, I have no problem with where we are, you know, in the middle there. And, you know, you look at some of these others, there's a lot of stuff that goes into the calculation of net current expenditures, unfortunately. And it's so very hard to take a lot of the charts that we're given and to compare us with Newington or us with Rocky Hill or us with anybody, because, you know, Kevin will know, and Ryan too, everybody puts their budgets together differently. Some places we have things that are in the general fund outside the Board of Ed budget, and, you know, referred to as in-kind services, and, you know, other places, you know, put it inside the budget. So some of these things are hard to figure when you're looking at tax rates and stuff like that. NC, the net current expenditures, is supposed to really bring everybody onto the same, you know, the same wavelength. But, you know, I agree. When I look at, you know, some of these charts about, you know, neighboring towns, to me, that means nothing to me, right? Just because our needs are not the same as everybody else's needs, you know, and our priorities are not the same as everybody else's priorities. Our debt levels are much different than most other places. So to me, I get it down to trying to do whatever I can to look at what we need now, you know, and I don't make it into a 10-year from now exercise either, you know, of trends where we're going here or we're going there, except when we come to debt.
so
But I mean,
two other pieces that just in my thinking is one is, you know, whether it's 3.2% or 4.7%, I'd really like to understand what that does to the overall tax rate, because I'm a senior citizen, I'm on a fixed income, I've been retired for 11 years, I get no cost of living increases in my pension whatsoever. I do get a little bit on my Social Security when it one year was great, the other years are so-so, but you know, my salary per se, like if you're working, is the same today as it was 11 years ago, and I'm absorbing 3% and 4% increases in my taxes every year, and we have a large aging population here, you know. So I need to understand what this means to that mill rate too, either scenario, and that should be a factor in what we do also.
No, I agree with you 100%. So my parents are in a similar situation, obviously. But me, having 2 young kids in school, I still have to look for colleges to pay for colleges, which is not what it was when I went to college. The price is exuberant.
I understand.
So we all have the crosses to bear. To be honest with you, I don't want to pay more taxes than you do, or vice versa. It's just, it is what it is. But I want educated kids. I want kids with a similar education as you guys had and your kids had, and hopefully your grandkids will have, if you have grandkids. So I see your point, but we also have a point where I get it. Like,
Well, I would hope as your career progresses, you're outpacing to
We
some
all hope.
degree that increase in taxes. I'm not outpacing that any longer.
No,
Okay, so my
yes.
disposable income goes down every year. We have a tax increase. I feel.
Yes, it hopefully it does, but
I don't know if we
It
want the
doesn't
same
go.
education we had when we were school though either.
I don't know.
Well, Jerry, you were a few years ahead of me. I can remember 35, 40 kids in a classroom.
What?
Yes,
What school did you go to?
I went to first I went to KGS.
Well, yeah, that's
And I went to Griswold. I was the
that's
first
pre-K.
class.
Come on.
Mark and I went to school together. I was the first class. And this town had kids everywhere. And the classrooms were massive. Kids were sitting on the rows and back on the
Okay,
counters.
but
So
there was no computers. There was no plans for education because a child has some sort of a special need. In that sense, things are very different.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
don't, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I want an education like you guys had.
But let's face it.
I went to St. Paul's.
Oh, you were one of those kids.
So did my wife went to St. Paul's too.
My grandkids are at St. Paul's.
Oh, there you go, see?
But
No,
that's not
it's,
cheap either.
huh?
That's not cheap either.
No, it's not.
So one of the things that I'm gonna just say what I want to say.
Yeah.
One of the things that bothers me, the way this whole thing transpires is, you know, the superintendent comes in and he does his job and I'm
Sorry,
not.
George, you're talking about the way they present
The
budget.
way they do this, okay, just the process, okay, and I actually talked to a couple of people on the Board of Education saying, I don't know why you do it this way, type of deal. So he comes in at a 6.86%. To me, then, the Board of Education should be doing what we're trying to do here, but with a hell of a lot more knowledge about what the budget is, okay? And they should be looking at it going, there's no way this is gonna fly. So we want to try to we want to make sure that we do the best job we can and not get blindsided, and that we go in with us making us understand what the true impacts are. I have much more feel this would be much more credible if the Board of Ed had come in, okay, 6.86, but that's not going to fly. We really need 5.5%, and here's the reasons why.
But
And
don't-
here's what's not going to get done.
But don't they
If we
have a budget committee that works beforehand with the superintendent to
That was
get
my
to the
understanding.
6.8?
No, not my well, I
Well, that
don't
was
believe
my
so.
knowledge.
My understanding is the superintendent Ashley does the majority of it, and you may know better than I do.
There's a committee.
I know there's a finance committee, but they pretty much review, I think, what's been done. And I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
As I understand it, they just review and approve.
I thought the whole entire
Yeah, I
board
thought they-
approved.
As a matter of fact,
thought they
the
went-
year,
they
was it
worked
last year, they increased the budget over the superintendent.
Yes, they did last
Yeah,
year.
that's the one, the first year that.
I think one of the things that impacts that too is you gotta remember, we're non-partisan Board of Ed. I think in the towns where the boards of ed are not, I think there's more influence from the elected officials that's put on them when
To
their
do
budgets are being
cuts.
put together in the first place.
Which I understand that, but that still doesn't mean they can't function from the perspective of knowing that, you know, this isn't. I'd really rather
we've
come out of
talked
this
about that.
meeting with a more reasonable number based on fact than, you know, cause now we're gonna, if we put 3% out, we're gonna get told something. We put 4.6%, we're gonna get told something.
Yeah.
And they're gonna tell us what they're gonna cut and whatever, and then we go round 2 and do it all over again.
But it's like, they're gonna cut it. You know, I mean, to me, we do our job by coming up with what we think they should do. It doesn't get to me as to what they say they're gonna cut, you know, to get there. I mean, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's
No,
too uncaring or whatever, but I think it's, if we do our job to do what we really think this is what they need and we can afford,
Well, that's
which
the
is
other-
the two pieces that we
Right.
need to do.
That's the other part that I'm missing right now is
You know.
what do people think we can afford? We haven't really had that conversation.
So
I mean,
you're looking at
fortunately,
us
we did-
back in the 1.1 million out of what we're picking here.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it would be, I mean, if we were doing the same level as last year, it would be somewhere. Oh, too many notes.
2.75.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we would add 2.775% of their budget on top of the 1 million. The money that the state gave us.
I mean, I understand that, Jerry. but-
Yeah.
So when the ECS goes down, what do?
It doesn't go down.
Doesn't go
Doesn't
down.
go down?
It won't go down
It
next
hasn't.
year.
Hasn't.
They can't.
But that's a little arbitrary there too. You just, you know, because they got 1.1 million, you're adding it to a number.
Well, it's because
What's your real number? You know,
Because,
You know what I'm saying, Jerry?
yeah,
I mean,
well,
this
I'm
is-
only doing that because we haven't had much of an increase in those years. It is mandatory that we add at least
Yeah.
that much amount. And I still think that we as a town have some responsibility to fund education and not just say, oh, well, we got a lot more money from the state, so that'll take care of everything,
So if you, the 1.1 million wasn't in play, what would be your, I mean, just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I mean, I would still be looking to cover contractual. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's, even though, like you said, in some years, we've given them less than that and they've still made it through.
Not in some years, in all years,
Okay.
all years.
Yeah.
In the last 7 years, we've given them, they've requested an average of 4.7%. We've given them an average of 2.7%, and then all the money's left over, fine. In the last 3 years, they asked for 5%. We've given them an average of 3.1%, and they've been fine. Okay, so.
Well,
I mean,
you say fine.
Well, I mean.
They
I
have,
understand.
they're the ones that have to manipulate.
I understand that, but they made it work, okay?
Well, they have to make it work.
Well, that's.
They can't
Their job.
overspend their
It's their
budget.
job, yeah.
I mean,
That's how everybody's
there's-
measured.
yeah, there is. It's not, I don't think
Theoretically,
you'd hear
the only
fine, no.
increase, theoretically, if you really take it to its extreme, the only increase that anyone would get, town and Board of Ed, would be what the increase in the grand list was, and maybe additional state grants or something, which you could never do because of contractual services, even on the town side, and even labor contracts and things like that, because the increase was only like, even though it was substantial this year, it's not enough to cover the increases, because, just because you can raise taxes doesn't mean you should raise taxes. I'm not saying that. But to your point, I do want to know what the effect would be, but I also don't think we should look at it as a bad thing that they don't come back and that we expect them to be cutting. That's my.
See what the numbers
Yes.
are? Sure. You put something in, Kevin?
I did not put anything in.
Oh.
I have one request before we start putting on the
Yes.
numbers. In looking at the change last night, the capital that we took out included the impact of those 2 items that I had put in red that said reduced amounts. So if your intent was to remove all the capital excluding the $70,000 for the police vehicles, there's still capital money in there because the request was higher, the reduction was not in the budget. So if that's your intent, I would ask you to vote to reduce a little bit more.
Yeah, to zero it out.
Yeah. So 2 items that were
Yeah.
the 2 items that we used, one was the flock cameras, you may recall that if we sign it, they would
Right.
take 15 grand off. The other was the Board of Ed number for security cameras, it was 157.5 in the original submission, they said 50 would do, and you took 50 out. So before looking at the numbers, it's not an insignificant amount, it's $122,500 more of capital to come out to meet your intent. Then we can start playing with numbers, so you're dealing with something after the fact.
So we can put the cars back in. To the capital, the police cars.
Police cars stayed in,
They're-
they stayed in the general, they're the only thing in the general fund.
That's all.
These would remain, when we have to make the adjustment, these are sitting here because last night's vote, the dollar amount was on the reduced amount, so you
Okay.
wanna take another vote to reduce it further by these amounts. And then we can start playing with the numbers.
Okay,
I didn't think you'd have a problem with that, but
No,
Vote on that.
yes,
okay.
it's
Yeah.
120.
You make a motion, we do what Kevin just said.
Second.
To reduce it by,
I,
aye.
no, where were we?
So you wanna look at
1.08, so better than.
Let me give you a number.
a
Do you have a
reduction
number?
number or an
Do you have a
increase?
number?
Reduction number or an increase?
A reduction.
How much you wanna reduce or how much you're considering?
This would be one of the thing that I said initially, where we would fund an increase this year of 2.775% and the ECS. So their reduction would be $1,015,329.
1015329?
Yeah.
That would get you to 30.95 mill rate, 0.74, so potentially 3/4 of a mill increase. On a house worth $345,000, the increase would be $178.
So less than a mil.
Yeah, about roughly 3/4 of a
What's
mill.
that number again, Ken? Million.
What's the percentage to the Board of Ed? You scroll.
Oh, so that's that mystery 1.1 million everybody's been talking about.
4.92,
That 1.1 million
That's-
mystery,
that's
mystery
the
money is what
magic.
you're,
2.7.
Yeah.
nothing floating around, yeah.
Oh, the one for this, yeah,
Yeah.
for the school stuff.
I wasn't sure how that was gonna affect anything.
That is, if you look at the 4.37 and the 0.41 for the
Right.
215,000, it's just slightly above
Yeah,
what they have in the red plus the top bucket.
Cause that's 4.78.
Yeah.
Just do those two.
So you're talking 3/4 of a mill by reducing theirs by just over $1 million. That would give them a 4.92% increase. And overall, it'd be 3.96 for general government, overall 4.45 or 4.5, almost $4.6 million increase. You go from 102.8 to 107.4 million.
how much do we need to get to a zero?
Zero,
0%, zero increase.
no increase at all.
Yeah.
On what side? Both sides?
No, overall.
Oh,
Zero
On
mill
mill
rate
rate,
change.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, just for,
Might be able to do it.
I was playing with that.
is it 3/4, he said? 3/4, that's about 2.2 million.
This would be about a million. It's
If it's got five, she has
Yeah,
to have
that's
about
a little
three.
less than a mil.
1.6.
Yeah, that's pretty darn close.
So much?
Oh, that's gonna be too
Probably
much.
too much. But reduce it.
Yeah. There it is, there it is.
So much?
To just shy of 2.
2 billion.
Oh,
Two.
who said that?
I did.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And what's the percentage increase on the mill rate?
If I take this up, just with your number,
Yeah, just where we were.
2.44%. So call it 3/4 of a mill and 2.5% increase.
Still debating those two positions.
That's right. If
Um,
we took the
No,
two
these
out.
are the other two.
We've increased the staffing, we have to
That's right.
understand that. And I'm still not on board with that, so I don't know where we're gonna go with that yet.
Mhm.
If we took that out, what would that do?
It's like another, what?
That'd be 160,000 more.
Just one
Take-
police officer out or two?
Two.
Wasn't it like 258?
Eighty apiece.
Yeah, with
250.
And it would
All the
basically,
benefits.
be this one again.
Yeah.
That would bring you down 1/10 of a mill, bring you down to 2/3 of a mill increase, 2.1%. If you took Jerry's number,
I can't imagine 2.44 is a bad increase either. Though. I don't think we're gonna be seeing that around other towns.
What's the Board of Education number in this one?
4.92%
We're
increase,
still 4.9.
it would be 55.1 million, up from 52.5, 4.92.
I'm not there. I hear Jerry, but I'm not there.
Now, if you took another, pick a round, 485,000, made
There we go.
Where are you thinking?
it 1.5 down.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
absorbing it all.
It was 1.5.
What would that be?
4% increase for the board. If you took another, you made it instead of 1.015, you made it 1.5 million reduction. Just round number.
So what would it be at 4%? For the Board of Ed?
4% for the Board of Ed would give you 30.78 or 0.57, 1.9% mill rate increase,
What's the value,
0.57.
what's the value of 0.37? Between the
It's a
4%,
third of that.
where's the money value though?
With the 1.1 million off, at least I'm gonna put us. That would be,
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did check that one.
So the math right now is at 4% for the DOE.
Okay,
If we put in the 0.37,
You made it 4.37.
yeah. What would be the number value on that? In terms of money?
Can you just get into that line?
there would just be 2295, 567 off of their total.
That's 4.375 is mandatory, I mean, they're
Contractual.
That's gonna basically be 1.3 off.
But if we're just doing the 4.375 or whatever, we still have to remember the state mandated.
4.38 rough numbers. Would get you to 30.85, 0.64 again. You're now in that neighborhood, 2/3 of a mil increase.
And that's with the police officers out as well?
Nope, that's, police are still in. That's just getting to the 4.3, roughly 4.37, basically funding the red box.
That's the proverbial having your cake and eating it too.
Then what are we doing
Well,
about the state
those
mandated,
numbers.
the reading?
Is that one time or is that ongoing,
What?
What's that?
the reading program?
No, they put it off for like 3 years now.
No, I know, but I mean, is it a
Will it be
one-time
every
cost
year?
for materials or is it an every
My
year expense?
understanding is that that's the cost to bring it in and get everybody trained on all the materials.
Is it gonna be there?
No,
next
I don't-
year? That's
I-
my question.
The program's gonna be there, but I don't believe the cost.
Also.
There
There will likely be
there
some
will be some,
ongoing,
but
but I
it'll be
don't
buried in
think
their
that
budget
great.
after that. It'll be in their budget after
Yeah.
that.
Right,
Yeah.
They have one officer that they can hire now. Maybe we can look at one.
Are you thinking taking one out and leaving one in?
Remember,
That's-
we also have the FOI person. So
Yeah,
that's supposed to
part-timer.
be, that's supposed to be freeing up a lot of hours.
Both see.
If you did the 4.38 rough numbers there, and you took out one officer, so I basically just did half of the 284, so 142 comes out. You would be at 30.8, 0.59 mil increase or.
But
Just under
what does that
2%.
do to the reading program?
it's not in there.
That's not in
It's not
there.
in there.
That's why. I mean, to be in there, it's gotta be at least 4.7.
Can you just do an add of 215,000, just so we can see what it is?
Yeah, Goes back.
You're back to it.
yeah,
You basically would put the reading program
2/3.
back in,
Yeah, 2/3 of a mil. Wow,
and it's 100, for a property value, $345,000.
and without that 2.6 million, we'd be,
yeah, what a lot worse.
well, we'd have no capital.
Yeah.
This way, we're gonna at least have to come out of the year with capital already paid for.
Yeah.
Well, and that'll help for next year.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
so at
fund
least,
balance will take whatever.
and,
Yeah.
yeah,
you need now.
Probably still look at mill rate, the dollars, and put it in a household.
So it'll be the increase in the household?
171.
Once
161.
for a $345,000 house. I mean, if you had a $500,000 house, you're probably talking 250, 270 for the year.
Are you talking assessed value or the actual value?
Actual,
Actual value.
there's not many had left at 345.
How much would that be?
Well, if you were $500,000, you'd probably be anywhere like 250, 270 for the year. Call it $20, $25 a month.
We're also gonna have a little bit of a tax decrease on cars.
Well, in this case, you wouldn't, because it's below 3246, so, I mean, I guess your value.
Yeah, but the way
Likely
they
will come
redid
down.
it, you're still losing a little bit on your car tax, not a lot, but it's gonna be a few
Because
bucks.
of the way they're valuing them, you mean?
The way they redid the valuation, yeah.
Built into the grand list then, you're right, this is the revised.
I think he's talking individuals, like you as an
Yeah.
individual.
Oh,
organization.
yeah.
Your-
Oh, yeah, you're
your-
getting
your
at
number
that.
would-
Yeah.
That'll be a small decrease.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, you'll see a decrease, yep.
What's in there for the Board of Education now? I have no idea.
I know.
4.375, I think, is in there now.
Plus
It's
the rating
Plus
program.
the.
4.79,
Plus three.
Explaining that to the
Yeah.
public.
which is basically the 437 plus the reading.
I hear you, but my opinion is that we keep on going from base to base, without considering whether there's any risk reserve or anything in their numbers. And I'm not willing to go to close to 5%, right now, in my mind.
But it's 4.3%.
I understand that, Raul, but, I don't know how many times I've been told every year, this year's different. We need all the money that we need, and then what happens at the end of the year? They do a good job, fine, but what happens is they do okay with the budget that we give them. And I'm not convinced I'm giving them 5% at this
Yeah.
time.
Can we agree that this year, at least, things are very different? With
They were different last year too.
I don't know.
Sure. and the
Well, last
before.
year we had a Department of Education. I don't think we're gonna have one for the next month. I think that a lot of money, a lot of grants, a lot of money that come to the state level and to the municipalities, each state, I think that money's not gonna be there. I think there's be a hard look, we got Fed money to get any kinds of things to help them. So,
We don't get much anyways.
I mean,
Like $500 a student.
but even so,
Well, they also get the
What?
mandates that come from the
But
federal
enough.
government on shit you don't even need to be doing.
I'm not
So
coming-
what's the
State minister
mandate
himself.
relative to
Yeah.
the money you get?
From
Could be
that-
better off, Raul.
From that standpoint,
Good.
Raul, if something fell off really big, I would think the town would step up and, kind of.
that's
provide
what
the money,
that's what we're doing. I think to have everything that we have and to go up 2/3 of a mil and everybody's happy. The police gets one position plus one part-time position. There will be no teacher cuts, plus the mandated reading is on there. Like, I don't see any lose-lose situation there. And I think with those numbers, frankly, all six of us could get behind. And I don't think there would be an issue, hopefully a second referendum or anything like that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think-
Everybody will be happy.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. so.
Let's say I'm close, but
I'll buy you ice cream. Dairy Queen.
Friendly.
I just want to get
Jeez.
me out on a date.
Listen, You've been saying yes, but you don't want to.
Well, why don't we take a minute to think?
Yeah,
We're back upstairs tomorrow night because
Absolutely.
we need.
I don't think we're
We need to.
horribly
review
far
it.
apart. here, but
You guys are not. I just want to say, I've dealt with
Worse.
some worse. You guys are very, everybody's on the same page, and I think realistic, which is
Yeah.
very, that's really encouraging. So
it's 3-3, we have no choice.
But you're actually just listening on the outside with no vested interest either way. You're not that far apart.
No.
Your
Mhm.
low
Yeah.
is 3.5. Your high is 4.5, 5.
Yeah.
You're realistically in and around 1% difference. And you're in a good spot because you have the 2.6.
yeah, that
Yeah.
makes.
Assuming the
Mhm.
council says we agree and we want to spend it, then you'll get the capital.
I mean, to have less than a mil increase.
Is
mm,
pretty good.
So I have a question. This is
it's a good year.
a naive question probably. Are there any mechanisms whatsoever to fund something that's a one-time shot in a Board of Education without burying it in their budget?
Department 61.
I mean, could we pay for the reading program and not have it, given that it's not a reoccurring cost?
I mean, that's what the council asked us to do with the security guards, and which is why they're in Department 61, and at the beginning of every fiscal year, I transfer whatever's in the budget to Ashley. And then they pay salaries, they manage, they do everything, but when the armed security guards were put in, the council had some concerns about whether that would be in the MBR and how that might be
So is
used in
that
the
a
future.
yes?
Yeah, that's Department
Is that
61.
something to consider?
But isn't that getting into
No,
more of the
better.
curriculum? I always thought 61 was for things
I'm
like,
just talking about, we know it's a one-time expense, it's kind of pushing us over the edge a little bit.
I mean, if you did it, it can be
We
put in
went
there
with
with
the
the directive that I
4.3
sent
then,
actually at the
Instead of
start of
us
the year.
next year saying, oh yeah, we gotta back
We've
this
got
out.
to back this out, which
before
was
we
never
start.
gonna happen if
Can
you
you
don't
take it
put it
out?
in there to begin with.
Can you take out that
And that's
amount?
the thing
The
that
two-
bothers me about
250.
the increase.
It
Well,
goes down to
but you
5.
have to put it in, you just put
It's
it in
their
Department
fault.
61.
Yeah.
You'd still
So it's
put
got
that,
to leave
But
it.
that's-
you have to put it in
stays
the budget, that's just geography.
But what you're saying is it would give you a little bit more confidence that it would get spent in the manner they
Well,
want it to.
and we wouldn't multiply it next
Would
year.
multiply
Yes,
next year.
we We
It wouldn't
always
be
have to
fair.
give them more money, so every time we do something like, you know, it sounds good to
It's a
do 4.9 or whatever, but.
It's not a
That's
bad
the-
idea,
yeah,
but
that's-
it
You know,
just,
there's stuff in their
As
budget.
we
as
say,
you look
Esther's
through
gonna
it,
be there
like,
forever.
there's one piece of software that has a 3-year renewal subscription for like, I don't know, a couple hundred, whatever the amount is, it's in there every single year. But it's a 3-year, they pay it every 3rd year, but it's in there every year. There's stuff like that in there, and that bothers me, you know? So I don't wanna put another one in there, type of deal. Won't get it back.
I have no objection whatsoever of us doing that
Hmm.
with that.
if that's gonna do
we can find a
this,
way to do
I
that.
would,
Yeah.
but I think it's a little, it makes me feel it's a little uncomfortable as far as getting into curriculum.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's something else in their budget that would be easier to move,
Yeah, that might,
you know,
Besides that,
something on the equipment and we could move it to the CNR fund or something.
that's an Ashley
Or
question. maybe.
transfer. Well, we have the budget.
it's a very good point.
One
No, but
time
what-
buying $100,000, $200,000 worth of computer.
Well, now, and the police
I'd rather
officers
do
too
that.
now, the town council's gotta look at that because we can't actually increase the police staff, they have to do that.
Can't what?
We can't, we can fund stuff, but we can't change the police, their staff for 46 now. The town council has to increase that number to 48, we can't actually do that.
Well, it's embedded in the budget, so if it's
They have
approved in
the
the budget,
ability,
they
yeah.
can by charter, if staffing is removed from the budget. Town manager cannot add it in without approval of council board of finance, but if you put it in the budget and they approve the budget, they are by extension
Yeah.
approving.
Well, that's what I'm saying, they can pull it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they can do that with anything you
Yes,
guys put in here.
So what do we do?
They've proven it.
All
Yeah.
one person?
Yeah.
This one would show one, so it would go to 47 instead of
I mean, the
48.
only thing with them is I don't know what their overtime is yet.
Well,
I mean, it's like, I don't even know if they need 48, to be honest with you. I mean, personally, you know, I mean, I don't know.
And I did have a discussion, and I'll just get very high level because when I talked to the lieutenant, anyway, he knows it obviously a lot more than I do. There are certain elements of overtime that are tied into the staffing, and maybe a call-in because somebody called out sick, you would likely see reductions from there. But there are other elements of overtime that are tied in with specialties, either by rank or somebody's specific specialty or something.
contractual, in their contract.
Well, even the event itself may necessitate someone with specific training or something specific that if that happens, the person, or it might be 2 people or 3 people with that training, and they need to call them in. So they are looking through all those numbers to give some numbers to that description, but it's not all of the overtime is 1 for 1. I guess is the best way to
But,
put
I
that.
mean, but the model they gave it said 0 overtime, and I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so they are working and are gonna talk tomorrow. They said the chiefs were out today, so they're planning to come tomorrow night and
Oh,
and
right.
give some substance behind that.
Because the other day, because on the other side, I would knock down overtime. 100K. If staff's going up, you know, you really gotta sooner or later see some overtime come down.
I would even,
But I don't know the overtime hours enough to understand what would knock it down, so, you know.
Right,
at
and
least reduce the overtime by the amount that the FOI person is gonna
$1,000
be
hours.
taking.
That's 40 grand.
It's
It's like 41.
48,000, so I
About 50.
reduced the overtime
Why
by
don't we see if it
50,000.
goes something tomorrow?
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I reached out because I would hate for you guys to make a cut and
Right.
regret it. So I'm trying to give them a chance to come in and speak because I won't speak for the town manager, but I'm not gonna be able to explain it to you as well as they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
So I
You know,
think
$80
more than
versus-
that, you said.
Absolutely.
So, but even if we take the 50 and round it off to 600,
Yep.
we're moving in the right
Which is
direction.
good.
Okay.
I don't know if we could take that 215 and just put it in Department of Health. You know, I mean, it would be easier to take a piece of equipment and put it in CNR or in Department
But I do
61.
like that idea.
But then we're dictating to them basically how how to adjust their budget too, you know? If
Well, you
it's
can
the
go,
re-
do you
with
want the
reading-
money or not?
Yeah, with the
You know,
reading-
it's like, okay, all right,
No.
you're right, you got a good
No,
point,
I-
you're not getting
Forget
it,
it.
you know, it's like.
that, but I think it's cleaner if we did something with the equipment and we, you know, then they take it out of their budget, you know.
We could budget it in professional services. The town historically, going back up till the last like 2 years, had shared the human resources position.
Okay,
The Board of Ed had the position, the Board of Ed budgeted the position. The town, they basically said, here's what the person costs. The town budgeted 40% of that. And took that money and transferred it at the start of the year, basically paid the Board of Ed. I couldn't tell you with absolute certainty that they actually paid that person, other than I worked with her, so I know she was here, so I'm assuming she was getting paid. If you put it in a professional services line and say that will be transferred to you, it may be with the intent, but again, there's no certainty. If the Board of Ed said, we won't do this program, which obviously is absurd, but
Isn't that also Doug Solik's share
we
like
did the
that?
same thing the other way, where the town had the facilities director, they reimbursed. We've gotten out of that practice when we hired a full-time person. But we've done that. We could use professional services. I'm assuming that this is bringing people in for training and paying for materials. That's my assumption as a pretty naive person on what this is. But I think you could argue that professional services would be an appropriate line to use. It would just be, but it would be transferred and then it would go to the Board of Ed. They would have to do this.
yeah, at least it'd be out of their budget for next year.
And the same is true with security guards. I transfer the money right at the start of July for the whole year. I mean, theoretically, they could lay off all the security guards, the money's still theirs. But again, you would know that, because word's getting around pretty fast. If they have an armed security guard at Griswold and then they don't, parents are somebody's gonna say something.
Oh, yeah.
Same
I'll
thing
say
with this.
something.
If they're not doing the reading program, you're probably gonna see it in the paper if you don't hear it by word of mouth pretty fast. I think you could make that argument because we've done it.
Totally different subject. I forgot in my questions yesterday. In the golf course budget. You knew this was coming, right?
I was gonna say.
I think I know exactly where you're going.
Okay, I think there's like a $15,000 item that looks like it's inter-town charges. Does that ring a bell to you?
Are you talking about the new lines for operating materials and contractual services facilities?
Maybe.
Dash facility. That's actually
It's a
not.
mouthful.
Contractual services facilities, 15,000.
Hold on, yeah, capital.
Should be, if you went to the details, it would be 109, page 119 on the details. There's two $15,000 lines, one's contractual services, one's operating materials. Each are 15,000.
Yes. 15, the contractual services facility.
Yep.
Is this in other departments now charging the golf course budget?
These are incremental hard dollar costs specific to the golf course. So what it does is it takes those items that historically have been included in the year-end P&L. So there's sort of the direct P&L, things we run through the ledger, and then there's the subsequent P&L, which ultimately leads to how much can we transfer, or how much could they request to use for equipment and other things. And it puts it into the budget. This is not staffing. There are no staffing costs. There's no
And
allocation.
are we doing this to all departments?
No, because no individual department has its own infrastructure like the golf course has. In other words, you couldn't charge finance for town hall because, I'm sorry?
Library?
Well, there's two departments using that between Parks and Rec and the
Well,
library.
I'm just wondering why now all of a sudden we're, you know,
In charge.
trying to dump everything in.
The intent of this was to take cost, this is based on actually a historical analysis of what was in that P&L. The intent is to be able to get to the answer of, is there a surplus and how much faster?
Yeah,
So
but
that we
they're in
can
the general
transfer.
fund, it doesn't matter. That, what the ordinance says for their P and L has no impact on what their budget is. And now what you're doing is you're introducing into here a factor. And I don't know, honestly, whether they have factored in kind expenses before when they did their revenue analysis. All right, so now you're forcing something into the budget that they have to consider to cover with their revenues. Because the ordinance says they have to cover their budget with their revenues.
Where is that, Jerry? I'm sorry.
Page 119, down about 2/3 of the way down the page, contractual services facilities. I mean, was this something that you came up with or someone else came up with or?
I had proposed it, spoke with the golf director, spoke with facilities, so.
Okay. Won't say I agree with it, but.
I mean, you can certainly take it out.
No.
Like I said, the intent was
Yeah.
to get the costs into the right bucket so that we can get to the answer at the end of the year rather than waiting longer so that equipment can be purchased soon. One is-
Is there any other costs that show up on their P and L that are not in their budget?
Show up on their P and L.
That the one that you're referring to where you used to have to add this in, are there any costs that are not charged to their budget or will their budget be their P and L?
The budget will be the P and L. This was the only piece.
Wasn't in there.
Yeah, the end of year P and L did include allocations for staff time and other things. Those were always excluded when it came to the final number and said, here's what's available to transfer
Okay,
or to use for.
so it's
equipment.
not like when they send guys up to do painting and stuff like that of the clubhouse or.
This is if somebody from
No, I'm
outside,
saying that doesn't figure into their P and L either.
and not even the recurring, like if they have to send somebody
At
up for
one
like
time
an
it did.
alarm or something.
At one
This
time.
is the incremental, they get a phone call and say, we want to replace all of the gutters around the building.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, well, that's gonna come out of this line instead of the facilities line, and then facilities tracking it all year. And then saying at the end of the year, this is what we have.
Okay, so that being facilities, does someone take that into account when they're setting the rent for the restaurant?
Because this was new, it was not because he's in the middle of his contract,
Okay,
but it will provide us better visibility. This will provide us a lot better visibility into that when the next contract comes due.
okay, 'cause it's always been one of those things that, some of the people on the golf course commission talk to me about and, and with you. But it's, certain, there's certain costs that run through the budget that relate to the restaurant operation and the pro shop operation. And they're just wondering if all of those things are considered when we, come up with the annual rent contracts. And I don't know who does it. I think Arosha used to do the, so it
Good.
probably falls.
Ready.
The latest Golf Pro contract does not have any rent in it.
Okay, and that was probably one of the
There were
considerations.
concessions on
Yeah.
both sides to get to the contract. I don't wanna make it sound like the town just gave up rent
Oh,
and
no.
got nothing back. There were concessions on both sides. There have been some questions about whether the restaurant rent is adequate to cover true direct costs of the restaurant. I don't know that it was ever intended to be dollar for dollar because the restaurant also does add value to the overall experience, so there's an element of that,
Sure.
but this will provide us better visibility faster to be able
Yeah.
to see what are those true incremental costs.
Okay.
And again, it's not if the garage does repairs on a vehicle, that's not included in here. If facilities goes up and like custodians go up there every day and do work, that's not in here. That's assumed to be like every other department.
Thank you.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, favor?
Aye.
We upstairs or down here tomorrow?
Upstairs. This one's just a continuation of
I think they're
Kevin,
coming.
you think we'll have the police stuff tomorrow?
They're coming.
I think